Hello, everybody. Welcome to Writers Drinking Whiskey, Triple Shots, the show where even Ernest Hemingway wakes up with a hangover asking, what the hell just happened? I am, of course, your host, William R. Hincy, and today we've got a special Christmas episode. I'm doing my hands on the camera. There we are. We got Christmas stuff here. I don't know if I can keep this out. It's been an amazing first year of the show, full of heart and laughs and insight and substance and just remarkable guests. So to celebrate, I'll be sharing some of my favorite moments from season 1 and previewing some of season 2, which is well in progress. And I'll be reading the titular story from my anthology of satirical Christmas stories, A Fire for Christmas. So, 60 seconds on A Fire for Christmas. What's it like? It's like the bullies from A Christmas Story giving a wedgie to every Hallmark movie ever made and asking them, is it really a wonderful life? With a dash of Christmas magic. Premise? Two writers meet at a conference and have a romantic liaison in a supply closet right before the COVID lockdowns. In an attempt to rekindle the romance, they exchange letters and Christmas stories, sharing their lives and dating through the stories. Style? The general style is that it was written by a drunk angel in the process of quiet quitting. The story-by-story style changes based on who's writing the story. From renowned author Lourdes D.P. Ivy, bestseller of Christmas Smut and Holiday Perversion, to struggling sci-fi writer Jeffrey Dahl, the stories take them from childhood to adulthood, aging along with the storytellers. What others are saying? Well, it won 2 American Fiction Awards and an International Book Award. But what really touched me was some of the completely unsolicited praise and utterly factual review. A riot. The best book ever written. Thanks, Ma. Lastly, fun fact, the titular story is based on a misadventure between my brother and me during the infamous Christmas of 1983. Revenge is a dish best served cold at Christmas. I'm coming for you, big bro. And the hardcover is meant to be colored in. A Fire for Christmas. Most people forget the Christmas presents they receive as children. Tragically, I'm not one of them. I remember every gift plopped beneath the tree, each with as much care and grace and gusto as the droppings left by a chihuahua with bowel control issues. The horror show started in earnest when I was 4. The present? A pair of pink hooved slipper socks that oinked when you wiggled your toes. Upon seeing them, my mom instituted the now infamous try them on tradition, which turned perilous when I tripped on a hoof and nosedived into our artificial tree. It was then that I learned all of my clothes were given to me at least 4 sizes too big. The next present was a Flair Bear fanny pack, complete with articulatable Sir shares a lot bear front and center, his arms wide for a hug, which, positioned as he was at the crotch, came across as too risque even for my adolescent mind. The following Christmas brought 2 articles of what can loosely be described as clothing, but can never be described as tasteful. The first was a red toboggan shaped like Giggly Mo's head. Demented designers, and what I can only assume was a stroke of wicked ingenuity, fashioned it with googly eyes that wobbled and stuck in odd positions whenever you moved. A highlight that brought squeals of glee from my mom, who ordered me to keep wearing it as I opened the rest of my presents. If there was one thing Ma had an aptitude for, it was torture. Next up, a yellow bird coat decorated with glittery feathers and wings. Yes, wings. Giant wings that flapped when you raised your arms and made you look like a condor with jaundice. To cap the spectacle, Santa favored me with a pair of Gimpy the Pooh Bear shorts, which read Gimpy on the front and Pooh on the back in bold brown letters. As if the exception proving the rule, the shorts were 2 sizes too small. Suddenly, I could sympathize with how the Grinch's butt crack must have felt. In fact, the pain in my crack left me questioning What had happened to the notorious lump of coal my mom promised would be bestowed upon the naughty? It, at least, would have been useful. I could have pummeled my coat to soot with it. Suffice it to say, these gifts kept on giving, snicker after snicker, noogie after noogie, wedgie after wedgie, and hey, everybody, look at him, after hey, everybody, look at him. I can still hear my mom's voice echoing off the trailer's aluminum walls. Oh, stop being a baby. Those are cute shorts. But as I rounded the corner to 6 years old, I was becoming a kid. Not just the oversized toddler my parents dressed like a rodeo clown with Arrested Development. Moreover, I was watching Navy Stan. And with Christmas approaching, my aim was set on something more fitting than wardrobe malfunctions. The object that caused me to lose my poo shorts every weekend afternoon at 3 p.m. was an action figure named Mombasai, a soldier who was part snake, part commando, part ninja, part bodybuilder, and all cool. Dressed in black scales from head to toe, he had black goggles even, black goggles. He came equipped with star-shaped grenades strapped across his chest, an Uzi submachine gun, and a samurai sword. He never spoke. Not even a single grunt, hoof, or hiya. He just punch kicked and blew Frack up with a mystical fury and a signature move, the Venom Smack, a sidearm slap across the chest that could instantly vaporize his enemies. I had never seen anyone obliterate the machines of war with less fuss or more pizzazz. I begged and begged for Mombasai, writing letters to Santa Claus, Mrs. Claus, elves, even Santa's reindeer. I didn't include Rudolph. He seemed a little too green to have much sway. I went as far as hinting to my parents, the ultimate long shot, as my mom steadfastly insisted that anyone with shoes in a family had no need for toys. Put them on, Ma insisted that fateful Christmas morn. She was referring to the garb of Christmas past, which she'd fiendishly laid out before the tree. We had a new family tradition. I did as told, not wanting to spoil any Christmas mojo that may be leaning my way, though nothing was leaning any direction the second I squirmed into my poo shorts. With my yellowbird wings flapping, I held the first present to my ear and shook it, convinced that if it rattled just right, Santa would transform it into the Mombasai action figure of my dreams. Although perhaps Santa was the wrong word, since my older brother had already informed me the night before, by way of waking me to help him put the presents beneath the tree, that Santa was nothing more than my parents' meager checkbook. Still, the pain was too new, the knowledge too fresh to extinguish my belief in Christmas magic. And after a hearty shake, I ripped open my first present. A grumpy cat eating lasagna sweater. Yep, that was enough to douse the Christmas spirit. The deranged manufacturers had even depicted Grumpy Cat from behind, leaving a colossal, anatomically correct cat butt on my back. For the first time, I was grateful for my yellow bird coat, though the Christmas past and present marriage was a combo even a pimp would have taken offense to. Clapping her hands, Ma cheers, "That sweater's gonna keep you warm through high school." Dad, though, in an expression of resigned exasperation I'd come to know well, lifted his bifocals and rubbed the bridge of his nose with his palm. At least I wasn't the only one who didn't like the sweater. He said, maybe? Or maybe muttered is the right word? I can't say for certain to this day. The grumbling gibberish Dad spoke sounded like the murmurs of a drunken hillbilly who was too exhausted to muster full words, so he resorted to mumbling random unstressed syllables from the words he intended to say. Well, shit! Ma threw her hands in the air, a movement that sent her dentures sliding out of her mouth. Somehow over the years she had come to decipher Dad's grumbo lingo, and more often than not, it served to set her off. I can't wait until the holidays are over. Every year I do everything, and you just sit around complaining. No, shut up. Another hand throw. This time she connected with Dad's chin. Go on, she spat at me toothlessly, fumbling for her dentures. Finish opening presents. Never mind how stressed out your mother is. Wary of Ma's gummy agitation, I tried to pretend I was happy as I unwrapped the next box, but my mind was engulfed in questions. I mean, now that there was no Santa Claus, what was next? Was there no ozone layer, no hands across America, no Patty, the mischievous leprechaun who beat kids senseless in their sleep for tattling? I was sure that there was, though, because I'd been visited by his wrath a few nights before. And where in the world were my letters going? All these questions roller skated through my mind like a Galder sister wreaking havoc in the roller dome. And then came the hip check that sent me flailing over the railing. I opened my last present. Strawberry baby cake socks. Strawberry baby cake pink socks featuring scratch and sniff padding on the heel that smelled of pineapple and something musky. Baby cakes? I couldn't suppress a groan. It was so visceral it surprised me, as did the four-letter word that followed. I barely had time to brace myself before Ma smacked me upside the noggin. Quit your fussing, she smacked me again. There are starving kids in Appalachia who would love to wear those socks. Rubbing my head, I looked up to see Dad with his palm dug into his forehead, but this time he was wily enough to lean back out of Ma's sight. It didn't help. Now it's your turn, Bill, she said, reaching under the couch and withdrawing a white box. The type of box clothes are wrapped in, the type of box that invited scorn and ridicule and atomic wedgies. For the first time, I saw fear in the old man's eyes. He bent, open an edge, just a quarter inch, and, grinding his teeth so furiously I could hear it from across the room, peeped inside. Down, Navarrete, he said, pulling his hand away like he'd seen a spider. He was so pale, either he'd been visited by the ghost of Christmas or he'd received matching poo shorts. I looked under the tree again, my last ray of hope flickering away. There was nothing there. No Santa Claus, no Mombasai, not a glimmer of Christmas cheer. At this moment, I knew how the boys from Weird Science must have felt. Someone had forgotten the doll. Ma stood up with a huff. Okay, time for breakfast. There's cereal in the cupboard, water in the faucet. Help yourselves. Cereal and water. Cereal and water. Of all the Christmas atrocities, this was the vilest. Out of fear of inducing a post-traumatic stress bellyache, I can't relate the events to follow. Needless to say, with holiday mushiness squishing back and forth in my gut, I trudged back to my room to remove my holiday booty. But Ma heard the oinking of my piggy slipper socks and hollered after me, Leave on! A couple hours later, while I was trying to burn a hole in Grumpy Cat by rubbing my slippers together like kindling sticks, Dad's voice grumbled through the trailer. I walked towards the voice, like a near-death person on Unsolved Mysteries, wandering into the light. Inside, I could hear Robert Stack stop mid-narration and implore, Turn back, you fool! Hurry up, Ma yelled, rattling the trailer. Her tone was a mix of hysteria and whimsy, which could either mean I was in trouble or the rapture was about to occur. I felt the start. An instant of unbridled hope, but it was quickly blunted by my budding nihilism. No, it couldn't be Mombasai. It was just another article of merry sadism I'd be forced to parade about the living room. It had to be. Thank God Christmas only came once a year, but the package was the wrong shape. Too small to conceal any clothing my parents would buy me. Too many blunt angles to be a bald garment. And when I shook it, it didn't make a sound. Still, it had to be a shirt or shorts or a sweater. Oh God, could it be a belt? What would a Christmas belt even resemble? Would it be made of tinsel? Would the buckle be fashioned like two reindeer kissing? I trembled at the possibilities. I could feel my parents' eyes burning into the back of my neck, like hooves being feverishly rubbed together, but I couldn't stop myself. I was a kid. Opening presents was my crack. And before I knew it, the wrapping paper was gone, and I was holding in my hands Navy Stan. Sweet mother of giggly Mo toboggans. It was Navy Stan, and not just any Navy Stan. It was Mamba Sai, the silent but deadly ninja of my dreams. My body gyrated into histrionics. I jumped and kicked and high-fived the air, yellow wings flapping gloriously and my piggy socks cheering, oink, 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 oink. The scent of pineapple and musk bloomed around me, and I was sure that that's what heaven smelled like. Calm down, Dad said. But I couldn't calm down. I understood. In my euphoria, I was able to understand my dad. It never happened again. Ripping Mamba Sai out of his cryogenic chamber, I stuck him in Sir Share-a-Lot Bear's arms and hoisted one fist into the air as if I'd survived Saturday detention. Cereal and water, I cheered. Cereal and water. I played with my newfound best friend and my clothes for the rest of the afternoon. Mamba Sai beat strawberry baby cake into a bloody lump, but only after she and her wicked clone sisters had seduced him. Yo, Stan. I talked to Mamba Sai like I'd never spoken to anyone before. I told him about the kids at school who beat me like a frilly tetherball because of my misanthropic wardrobe. I complained about Ma not making breakfast and about how I never understood anything Dad said. The grizzled war vet just listened until I was forced to acknowledge that there were starving kids in Appalachia, and I could try a little harder to understand where my dad was coming from. Our marathon conversation was interrupted by the sound of my brother and one of his friends banging into the kitchen like lost boys returning to their favorite hang. You should meet my brother, I told Mamba. We were on a first-name basis now. You'll love him! In the kitchen, my brother and his friend were laughing about a kid they had put on Christmas Vacation, which I knew from experience was code for wrapping some poor kid to a tree with more lights than were used on the house in the movie of the same name. My brother, who had confided in me that he was a Russian spy sent here to uncover the secret behind America's thriving dairy industry, was wearing nylon pants decorated with a patchwork of pastel boxes, pinks, blues, greens, and purples, and more zippers than I could count. To top it off, he wore a matching insulated vest. It was an outfit fit to be under our tree. But curiously, he had chosen to wear it. What do you want, twerp? Mad Cow, that was his code name, said without turning to me. Before I could respond, his friend, who I knew as Oz of the Galactic Empire of Tight-Fitting Pants, even I thought there was something suspicious about that name, sucked up his Capri Sun into the pouch crumbled in his hand. Clad in ripped jeans, a red bomber jacket, and one bedazzled glove, he was the closest thing we had to a celebrity in these parts, having visited Action Park the summer prior and been seen in the audience of Yo MTV Raps. Leave before someone drops a house on you, he said, his wispy, effeminate voice making the words sound like both a threat and a party game. I got my first toy, I announced, pulling Mamba Sai out of Sir Share-a-Lot's arms. Like, for Christmas! You like Navy Stan? Oz said, adjusting a plastic rhinestone on his glove. Knowing every seaman is half the fun? So cool, I said, lost in remembrance of the Navy Stan post-credit lesson about never wearing a headdress after Columbus Day. So you got a toy, my brother slapped Oz on the arm and wiggled his eyebrows. That's awesome for you, Americana bro. Let's play together. Holy mother of mad cow, my brother had never offered to play with me before. I hadn't told Mamba Sai about his occupation. He was Navy Stan, 100% U.S. seaman after all, and he might have objected on behalf of national security, but he didn't say anything. So, either he didn't know, or for the sake of diplomatic relations, maybe, he was willing to set their differences aside. First things first. A little thing I was taught in Mother Rush My brother trailed off and gave me a foreboding glance. He had almost broken cover. If he weren't careful, his Soviet plant would find out, and we'd both be plotted. Never mind where I was taught. Open fly. Mombasai, I corrected. Closure fly, he continued. I didn't bother this time. Needs to undertake covert operations training. Covert! Images of a naked mamba slathered in sugar and riding a My Kinky Pony shot through my mind. The distinction between covert and pervert has always been tricky for me. Mad Cow stood and brushed off each shoulder as if removing invisible dust. Man, he was rad. The first test, he said, is hand-to-hand combat. It'll be tag team competition. Glass eye and... His face twisted into a sideways sneer, so foul would have given Scrooge the heebie-jeebies, soon to cry, versus me and Ozzy. Mad Cow snatched Mamba and jerked him into a vicious leg lock. Instinctually, I leaped into a hissing dragon stance, my hands coiled like a snake and poised to deliver the dreaded venom strike. But was I ready to vaporize my brother? Was he even my brother? Or was the Soviet endgame all along to get their grubby hands on my new sword brother, Mombasai? Grabbing me by the ear, Oz stuffed my head between his legs. For all his popularity, he stunk of hard-boiled eggs and insecurity. It's pile driver time, he said, with the ruthless, calculating malice of a children's clothing designer. And then I was flipping. The kitchen turned upside down. Giggly Mo flew off my head, and my poo shorts retreated deeper into their underground lair. I felt weightless, but just for an instant, because the next second I came crashing down headfirst into the trash can. When I came to, I felt as woozy and battered as someone who had just played around a Powerball on American Gladiator. Only I was the ball. My brother pulled me out of the trash can by my shorts, and it was then that I learned the damage that had been done. Mombasai was minus a leg. Shake it off, Mad Cow said. And maybe it was his smirk, or maybe it was the twinkle in his eye. The bounce in his step, the helium in his voice. But for the first time, I recognized that he was enjoying this. Perhaps too much. Even though I was distraught over Mombasai's loss of appendage, I was reassured by his nonchalance in the face of such insurmountable odds. Sure, my brother was a certifiable sociopath with no redeemable characteristics whatsoever, but as long as Mombasai was on my side, I knew we would prevail. The next test, many operatives don't survive, Mad Cow said, opening the freezer door as if a crypt. The next test is the legendary frozen tundra of Lambeau Field. Frigid air swept through the kitchen, causing me to shiver despite the layers of humiliation. Oz held, I'm really high, against the side of the freezer with his legs sticking out. Then, with the vengeance of a steel chair shot, my brother flung the door closed. On Oz's fingers, Oz screeched and shoved his gloved hand in his mouth, hopping around the kitchen and moaning. Surely, this one incident was enough to plunge the Russians into cold war with the galactic empire of tight-fitting pants. I was stunned but relieved to see Mamba hadn't lost any more limbs. But Oz was madder than a hairband after a bad cut. He ripped off his jewel-covered glove and slapped my brother with it, sending plastic jewels cascading through the kitchen. All of that spy training must have come in handy, though, because Mad Cow connected with an expertly placed knee to Oz's groin. Hee. Oz squealed, collapsing to the ground and clutching the part of his body that isn't appropriate to talk about at the dinner table. My jaw dropped. Laying on the floor across the room, Giggly Mo gave me a bug-eyed, holy shit, did you see that? Look. But Mamba? He reclined on his side, casually surveying the scene. Just another day in the office of 00 Snake Charmer. The final test, my brother said, leering with grim glee, is to see how wandering eye fares under heavy enemy fire. Mad Cow turned on the gas to the stove burners and told the Tsar to ignite them sporadically. One by one, the burners came to life, hissing like cobras, like king cobras, like Sensei Kreese of Cobra Kai, telling Johnny Lawrence to sweep the leg, sweep the leg. And although a perfectly legal and effective karate strike, Mamba only had one leg. So how in the name of holy piggy pajamas was he going to avoid it? My teeth chattered, my feathers trembled, and my poo shorts burrowed deeper into their bunker. But my Uzi Williams sword brother was as cool, calm, and black-clad as ever. He stood like a peacock, silently gazing into the flames from behind his black goggles. Prancing into the field, Mamba easily dodged the first two burners. He was composed under fire, all right. Even with flames bursting around him like laughter on the first day of school after Christmas break, he jumped and sidestepped with impossible agility and gravity-defying acrobatics. I cheered as he skipped past the third burner. With one left, adrenaline ignited like 1,000 laser swords in my veins. He was gonna do it. That crazy son of a bitch was gonna do it. But on the last burner, something went wrong. Terribly wrong. The last burner got him. Fire whipped up his torso and rippled down his arms and legs. Despite his predicament, he turned to me and I locked eyes with his goggles. And I could hear it. The psychic connection between me and my one and only true brother. Telling me to be brave, that everything would be okay. I would learn to love again. Before he could say anything more, he was falling to the kitchen floor, a flaming mask of Christmas cheer. He fell in slow motion. 1,000,000 years passed. I felt the sting of every wedgie I'd ever received. Ma bemoaned every stressful holiday after a hateful Christmas, and I heard everything my dad had ever said. He whimpered, then sobbed. The stank eye, lazy eye, snake eyes, Mamba sigh, incinerated before me. No, I cried, falling to my knees and shaking my fist in the air in a dramatic display of grief, horror, and oh my God, he's burning. Mamba sigh is burning. It was like Goose's ejection seat failing all over again. I couldn't bear to lose another soldier. Not like this. I begged, save him, Mad Cow. It was the first time I'd ever said his code name. But the Russian spy didn't flinch. The sneer grew 2 times more crooked across his stupid face. Finally, no longer fearing the incalculable danger of enemy gas burners, I dove for Mombasai. It's the most courageous thing I've ever done. But I wasn't a ninja. I was an awkward boy stuffed inside a XXL Grumpy Cat sweater and Yellowbird coat. As I sprang forward, a wing caught on the counter, and I was left dangling there with my slippers oinking, trying to pull my poo shorts out of my butt as Mamba burned on the kitchen floor. I'm melting, melting. Mamba sigh shrieked, sounding uncannily like the Wicked Witch of the East. Those were the only words he ever spoke. It's a sad, sad day, Mad Cow said. Why did you let me die? I was a good soldier. So good, in fact, that he'll feed the fishes for a week. Maybe even an appetizer for a mermaid. God preserve Daryl Hannah's legs. Lowering his head, Mad Cow waved his arm in what was either the sign of the cross or a precursor to Randy Macho Man Savage delivering an elbow from the top turnbuckle. Please observe a moment of silence while we give Burned goodbye, a burial at sea. He turned on the faucet and tossed Mombasai's scorched remains into the sink. The garbage disposal made a hellish chatter, then tore into Mamba's corpse with a sound that can only be described as sheer evil. Across the kitchen, Giggly Mo looked away, as if averting his gaze. The racket of ground hero apparently awoke Ma. She stormed into the kitchen with a crazed, "Damn you kids!" look in her eyes. "What the hell are you jagoffs up to?" she asked. But we couldn't answer on account of observing silence. "I can't leave yins alone for 5 minutes without something breaking." The overhead light flickered. Then the garbage disposal groaned and fell silent. Ma flipped the switch, but it didn't budge. Sticking her hand down the drain, she retrieved Mamba Sai's remains. Smoke black, charred, sliced to pieces. The only thing recognizable about him were his goggles, which were now soldered into his melted wax-looking head. Digging into the drain, Ma removed Mamba's bottom half. It was then that we discovered the true extent of his heroism. In a final, desperate act, he had wrapped his hips and legs around the swirling blades of doom, breaking the garbage disposal and ensuring it would never again be used to harm Allied troops. Once again, he had destroyed the machine of war. I couldn't help but salute, a single, well-timed tear falling from my eye. "Oh, quit your fussing," Ma said, uncoupling me from the counter. She rinsed Mamba off, stuffed him into my fanny pack, then pat Sir Scheherazad's head. "See? Good as new. Now get to bed." I looked down at my sword brother's mutilated corpse stuffed in the furry arms of my flare bear captor. And all of the disappointments of Christmas past and present swelled in my lungs until I was pointing at Mad Cow and dropping the last salvo of the Christmas season. "He's working with the Soviets!" If knowing is half the battle, telling Mom is the other half. Take that, you sniveling ninny. Finally able to shed my woolly oppressors, I lay in bed and looked out the window into the dense Christmas smog. I set Mamba beside me, too numb to care how it looked. Then I saw Dad out of the corner of my eye. Even though I could never understand him, he was the only one who ever understood me. I turned to say goodnight, and that's when I saw his present. A beige nightshirt that draped down below his knees. There were no frills, no bedazzlements, no homage to any cartoon characters. But the crochet work was shoddy, leaving nothing to the imagination. Looking quite cold, Dad gave Mama and me a sympathetic nod, rubbed his face beneath his glasses, and said, "Oh, that's fucked up." We have a lot of fun and laughs on the show. In fact, I think at this point, my laughter is probably like the laugh track of the show. I'm our studio audience at this point. But we also try to dig deeper. I want to make a real emotional connection with everyone I bring on. And my favorite thing is when people think I've known the guest for years and we're literally meeting at that point on camera. And that's happened numerous times for season. We've recorded some season 2. Already, I think every episode on season 2, it's kind of happened. And you can't do that. You can't make that emotional connection unless you dig a little, unless you get below the surface. One of the things I became enamored with asking guests is what haunts them. I have a couple of clips from season 1 where I asked authors T.D. Johnston and Dana Ridenour what haunts them and get 2 different but equally poignant responses. So what haunts you? Is there something that keeps you up at night? Or, I mean, maybe it's multiple things nowadays, but is there a particular haunt?
Gosh. No, I mean, really, no. I mean, I can't think of something specific that haunts me. Well, okay, I shouldn't say that. I'm getting older now, and not to turn serious, but, the older you get, the more you think about your end.
Sure.
And that has started to haunt me. I've always enjoyed life, and I still very much enjoy life. But as you get older, you start to think about the fact that day's coming.
Sure.
And what's it like? You go back and forth. Okay. Do I hope that there is another life after this one? No matter what I'll get, you might not get something you like very much.
I know you might.
Or, hey, until I was born, I didn't know that I didn't exist.
Sure.
Is it better to not know you no longer exist? That actually haunts me way more than when I was 35 years old, because you don't, when you're 35, you really, unless there's something wrong with you, you're not thinking a whole lot about the fact that eventually you're going to be older and you're going to die. Because you're still trying to, as Walt Disney said, keep moving forward, which we always should be doing.
Sure.
But yeah, so on a more serious note,
right?
I find, as a writer, I'm aware of the fact that Ernest Hemingway took his own life when he was 61.
Right.
61.
Right.
That's not old. And he ended it when he was 61. I mean, and if that doesn't haunt you in the sense of, well, that guy, how did he not have it all?
Right.
Is there any way that he didn't have it all? I mean, he had literary greatness. He had this generations of family. He was Papa. Why the world, And, but then you read more and you realize that he was suffering from advanced diabetes and all the things that come with that. And he wasn't, he didn't want to be here anymore. And so I think one reason it haunts me is that I do want to be here. It's great being here. It's a miracle that we're here.
Really?
And that helps things not to haunt you as much. Just knowing how lucky you are to be here in the first place.
What's something that haunts you?
Ooh, well, I was on the FBI evidence response team, and our team responded to 9/11. And of course, I went through all that, with recovery. We recovered evidence, we recovered the bodies, we recovered stuff like that. And that's one thing. But all these years later, 20-some years later now, we're living now with people dying from the effects. I had an 8-man team, and 2 of the 8 people on our team have passed away just in the last 6 months. And then one was younger than me, one was older than me. And so, that haunts me because I'm thinking I was exposed to all that stuff, all the chemicals and all the toxins. And, there's kind of not a day that goes by that I think, what kind of effect did it have on me? I know I had a little bit of effect on my lungs, and you try not to think like that. But, when you have 2 friends, 2 out of 8 have gone, and directly related to the effects from 9/11. And the FBI's lost a lot of people, but, NYPD, and it's unbelievable how many people they've lost to cancer related to that. So, that's something that really, really haunts me. And just now, I guess in the last couple of years, I've gone to my doctor and said, you know what, the government kind of low bids this to doctors and keeping track of it. And I don't want to low bid my health. So you tell me what I need on any kind of scans and any kind of thing like that. And let's stay on it because, life's short anyway. And so I don't want it to be any shorter because the FBI low bidded my doctor.
Sure. Yeah, no, I hear you. My dad, I mentioned earlier, he was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer about 10 years ago now.
Oh, wow.
And so it'd been remarkable. They didn't think it was going to last 18 months. And I think it was 2013. I might even be a little short. It might have been a tad earlier than that. And he's still around, still kicking. He's done really great. My wife works at a really wonderful cancer hospital called City of Hope. So when he got diagnosed, we had gotten him over there, and he's gotten amazing care. But it is something that, like, I mean, I commend you. I mean, younger people don't realize what a trauma 9/11 was just to the nation in general. I mean, you were on the front lines of it and the investigation and things, but what an event that was, I think it's been lost with the kids that didn't live through it.
Yeah, definitely.
But even so, it's so my dad has colon cancer. So my wife's always been terrified because he didn't find out until it was already stage 4.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, what are you doing? You need to go get checked. And it's always better just go get it checked. But you find out early, had they found my dad's early, he'd probably be cured by now. But he had waited. He's definitely that generation that my family's Midwest, West Virginia. He was born and raised right outside of Pittsburgh. So it's you don't go complain. You don't praise yourself. You don't go complain. You go do your thing and take care of your family and keep quiet and like it. So I mean, I'm glad to hear you're doing that, because hopefully it doesn't happen, but if it does, hopefully you catch it early. And
but that's it's always there, and even every year when the anniversary rolls around, it's kind of a somber time.
Right.
Just there's images that I'll always see, I think. And
right. I'm sure
definitely that haunts me.
Right. Yeah, I believe it. You know what haunts me?
What's that?
Ghosts. Like 2 Christmases ago, suddenly there are these ghosts around. I think they're waiting for me to learn a lesson, but still hasn't kicked in.
Yeah.
So I couldn't deal with the emotional weight of that, so I had to throw Ghost out. So I like
that. Yeah.
I apologize for my my childishness here.
I like Ghosts.
Of course, with a name like Writers Drinking Whiskey, we are legally and ethically bound to have, to include some writing talk, which we do to some seriousness and some frivolity and everything in between. Here's a clip from season 2 where me and author Michael Branch talk about the writing process.
For your entertainment pleasure, Bill, I'm going to tell you 3 mini narratives about writers who have unusual writing processes. And I hope that if there's anybody out there who's watching this because they're trying to pick up tips, we'll take this to heart. Okay, so I'm going to give you these 3 scenarios. Okay, scenario number 1. These are true stories, by the way. I can't give you the names of these people. Scenario number 1, this guy is a really well-known American novelist. A lot of his novels have been made into Hollywood feature films. I'm hanging out with this guy on a hike, and I ask him this question about his writing process. Because I was young, I was trying to learn. And he said, well, it's simple, really. It's pretty standard. I get up in the morning, I get a cup of coffee. I go into my writing den. I sit down in my chair. I put on my seatbelt. And I kind of paused and I said, you do what? And he said, yeah, I put on my seatbelt. And then I get my stabbing stick. I said, you're what? And he said, yeah, I put on my seatbelt and get my stabbing stick. Like he's acting like, what's wrong with you? And I said, well, what's your stabbing stick? He says, well, across from my desk, my whole wall is a corkboard. And that's where I keep all my notes, for my book projects. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, you got your notes on the corkboard. I get that. But what's the stabbing stick? He's like, well, I got to have a stabbing stick because of my seatbelt. I'm like, what the hell is this guy talking about? And he said, if I take off my seatbelt, I'll get out of my chair and then I won't write. So I got to have a seatbelt. But how am I going to reach my notes if I don't have a stabbing stick? So the point is, like, this guy's cranking out killer novels with this weird ass approach. But in conversation with me, it was like, what aren't you getting about this? Is so obvious. Okay, Second story. I have another friend, also a novelist. Okay, and she is the kind of person who, as she writes, she has a tendency to self-correct. She edits. She finds herself editing herself by the sentence. And it breaks her flow and her momentum as a writer. So what she does is she composes on a manual typewriter, old school, bangity bang bang, not even electronic, because she doesn't want to be able to go back and erase anything. With a manual typewriter, she has no choice. Once she's written something, it can't be erased, it can't be edited. So she composes on a manual typewriter, which is about as primitive as you can imagine. And then she has like a state-of-the-art scanner that she takes these typewritten pages and puts into to create a document that can then later be edited. But by the time she does that, it's a different stage and it doesn't interfere with her composition process. Okay.
Sure.
Third story. There's a guy who is a nature writer, and his stuff is all environmental, and it's all about the West, and it's all about the desert and the Sierra foothills. And when he gets stuck on his writing, he packs up all his notes and all his books into a giant suitcase, and he packs up a bunch of beer and whiskey into a giant cooler, and then he takes the whiskey and beer and the suitcase full of notes, and he goes and checks into a casino hotel on the highest floor he can get on. So he's looking out at the mountains, but he's in the casino. And then he just essentially stays up for 3 or 4 days straight and does his nature writing while he drinks in a casino hotel bedroom. Okay. So now here's the point for you novice writers out there. Like, all three of those sound like terrible, crazy ideas. And secondly, they're all three so different from each other. But the take home is these are people who have figured out how to handle their writing process for themselves.
My writing process, it's a lot like foreplay interrupted by a jackhammer. So it's like you're starting to get in the mood, you're titillated, you're feeling good, and then all hell breaks loose. You know, there's hammering, destruction, and before you know it, there's just debris, the landscape's altered, and you're like, what the fuck just happened here, right? You have no idea. And then like kind of a mixture of like raw humiliation, unrequited desire. I kind of start sifting through and, apologizing the whole time. I try to sift through and just sculpt it into something that, if not pleasurable, is kind of meaningful for the both of us. That's my writing process. I've been kicked off of so many panels. I would be remiss, and by remiss, I mean like delinquent and completely out of touch with what makes the show successful, if I didn't thank all the remarkable guests I had on this year. It's truly them that make the show special. I try to be a fill-in for the audience and keep us going, having fun. But it is their insight and input and remarkable readings and just work in general that really makes the show worthwhile. So I want to thank all of them by name here. If you'll permit me 1 second, if not, you can, there's, chapter marks on this and you could skip, but don't skip. Starting with episode 1 with TD Johnston. Tim, thank you so much for all your continued support. Dario Chariello was episode 2. Wonderful author and man. Dario, love you. Thanks for coming on. Mathieu Cailler, thank you for teaching me how to say Cailler like so brilliantly like I do now, because it's just like yippee Cailler. And so now I know. Matthew, thank you so much for all that you do. Ioana Arca, another person's name I butchered and now know. So thank you. Dan Conover, Janice Hardy, Dana Ridenour. Thank all of you. We have Daniel Cross Turner, John McElroy, Jim Kearney, Donna Armour, Eriq LaSalle, Mike Kozlowski, John Lane, Jesse Darnay, Gabby Larino. We met with more than 12 because we fit in some extra episodes. So thank you to everyone that's given the show a shot. Famous to just emerging. It was really, really fantastic. Thank you so much for spending the time with me, and especially the folks, Tim, Dario, Matthew, who else is on this list? Jesse, Gaby, that came on and before we even had anything recorded on YouTube for them to see. So they came on just based on I think me sweet talking them in like a Word document. So really thank you so much for that. And I need to thank you. Thank you everyone in the audience watching and giving our little show a chance here too. We're quirky. And what I really wanted was I would go to these author events and have these great conversations with these authors, mostly nothing about writing. They're fascinating people. We'd have a great time. And then I'd do a podcast or listen to a podcast. And it was all just about craft and kind of stock questions like what's your inspiration, et cetera, which are fine. And those, not to disparage those shows at all, but it wasn't as rewarding to me as those conversations I was having outside of those shows. So the concept of the show was really to try to bridge that. And, I like to drink, but I wanted to bring those conversations to you. So thank you so much for giving us a shot. And I hope you continue to. I hope that you come and at very minimum, you feel like you've had a chance to have a cocktail with a guest, get to know them and their writing a little bit. And my ultimate goal is I hope you come and you find the next author and hopefully more that you're going to love. Whatever little part I can do to get back to the days where you would buy a book based on the author, or you go watch a movie based on the director, based on the storyteller, not just based on the content, because people have so much to offer. And that's what I'm hoping to get out with the show. So thank you for allowing me to do that a little. Thanks for inviting me into your homes or phones or garages if you're listening to this working out. And so getting back to the readings, I wanted to end this show with a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, whatever it is you're celebrating, every New Year that might be celebrated, because I wish all of them were national holidays. So we just had more parties to go to. Happy holidays to you and yours. And to end the show, I want to leave us off with a few of some of the most stirring readings we had on the show. We'll have Eriq LaSalle reading from his book, Laws of Depravity. Great thrill having Eriq on. Thanks again for all of your time and thoughts, sir. Mathieu Cailler reading his poem, Password, which is short but powerful. And we'll end with a special sneak peek of season 2, episode 1 with Callie White. She'll be reading from her yet unpublished book, A Savage Place. So we'll have those 3 for you. And then we will see you again bright and early, first Monday of January for Callie's episode. Cheers, everybody.
All right. Laws of Depravity. This is the very first chapter. God had surely forsaken him. How else could he justify the pure evil that held him captive? Everett Degler was committed to God. He passionately dedicated his entire life to serving and pleasing his Lord. Everett converted souls and spread the gospel. He had instilled in both of his sons a fear of the need to worship God, even if at times he had to physically beat those principles into them. Degler made the necessary sacrifices. Whatever was required of him to gain God's favor and protection, he did without question. In the fall of 1981, the city of San Francisco was on edge with the murders that had played out in the news for the past month. Everett heard about the 11 victims, but never doubted for a moment that God was always watching over him. Everett's hands were tightly bound behind his back, and his eyes blinded by the cloth that had been securely placed during his abduction. As he was roughly led from the van that he had been thrown in earlier, he was aware of the cool trickle of urine that ran down the front of his thigh. Fear and absence of sight made him stumble and fall even under the firm guidance of strong hands. He tried to pray, but every new sound brought a greater distraction and sense of fear and dread. It took some time, but the 2 men found the perfect spot to kill Everett. It was an abandoned church on the outskirts of San Francisco in the Sonoma suburbs. Small and in the middle of nowhere, it offered them the type of privacy needed for the things that were planned. The men were brothers. The younger, one named Abraham, and the other, Noah. Abraham, at 23 years old, was tall, extremely muscular, and the leader of the 2. He had not involved Noah in the 11 prior murders, but he wanted him here now as a spectator and not a participant. Unlike Abraham, Noah didn't have the stomach to inflict pain, but observing it was a different matter. Besides, he had many reasons of his own for wanting to be present. Everett was still blindfolded as one of the men forced a large plastic capsule in his mouth and made him swallow. He was then attached to an old pulley device. Slowly, he was lowered into a vat of boiling water. He was pulled out just as his skin blistered and he was being asphyxiated by the steam, which was scalding and constricting his lungs. He was only immersed in the water for a few seconds, but the pain was searing and excruciating. Everett wasn't sure if he had passed out or not, but suddenly he felt the presence of one of the men just in front of him, pouring ammonia on his raw skin. As Everett screamed, he felt the man's hand loosen his blindfold. It took a moment for him to gather his bearings and vision. The blurred image of two men standing before him finally became clear. It was the recognition of the men that terrified him even more than what they had already endured. Everett was desperately trying to make sense of the sight of his two sons standing before him when Abraham stepped closer and smiled as he whispered, "Hello, Father."
This is a poem. We were talking about that. So yeah, Catacombs of the Heart. This is a real picture of the French catacombs, and it was
Very
in
cool.
kind of the emoji shape of a heart, the skulls, which always kind of blew me away that like back
Yeah.
all those centuries ago, the idea of like something that looks kind of like the heart shape as we know it was still around, even though it doesn't
Right.
look like an actual human heart.
Right. That's wild.
Don't know more answers about that, except that this is like kind of a dead end wall in the Paris catacombs where someone, centuries ago arranged skulls with bones around them. So it's kind of a fascinating photo.
Yeah,
Catacombs for me are kind of like a repository of all the things we live and go through. So I thought it was like an apt name for a poetry collection. So we were talking about grievances. Passwords have driven me crazy, as I'm sure everybody. So I decided to kind of write a little poem on passwords here.
very cool.
This password. Sorry, your password does not contain one of the following. Your password must contain a capital letter, 2 numbers, an exclamation point, a decimal, an M dash, 3 ampersands, the initials of your high school crush, the code from your first bike lock, a Van Halen reference, a Shakespearean sonnet, a Biggie verse, a symbol from the periodic table, the latitude of your first kiss, the longitude of your last one, an introspective look at Plato's Apology, your driver's license number divided by 12, Maya Angelou's birthday, Rumi's favorite prime number, the amount of eggs in your grandma's bun cake, the dollar amount left by the tooth fairy for your first molar, a Bible verse from Corinthians, the waist size of your father's lees, your grandfather's diastolic blood pressure, your heart rate when you lost your virginity, your high score on Ms. Pac-Man, the number of brooches owned by your mother, the size of the first bra you unhooked, the highway on which you received your first DUI, the amount of times you bought flowers instead of apologizing, postal address of the first house you egged, the number of ingredients in your special barbecue rub, the horsepower of a 65 Thunderbird, the number of pages in White Fang, the GPA of that foreign exchange student you cheated off of in math class, the ring size of your ex-wife, the day she began to feel unloved, the time of day she called and said she wanted to meet at the park, the sum of money her macchiato cost, the time she took, in seconds, to tell you she no longer loved you, the speed at which she pulled away from the curb, the amount of times you've thought about her since. Sorry, your password does not contain one of the following. Please try again. Sorry, that exceeds 3 attempts. Please try again later.
After 3 hours of driving, Father Joel Morris struggled to keep his eyes open, and his old Buick drifted to the shoulder of Highway 26. The tires vibrated over the rumble strips, and the soft gravel shoulder sucked the tire sideways. He jerked the wheel, overcorrecting and fishtailing across the pavement before regaining control. A passing truck in the opposite lane honked and flipped him the bird. Now wide awake and adrenaline pumping through his veins, Joel carefully steered the car into a muddy field access and stopped. He wiped a thin film of perspiration from his brow and took several deep, calming breaths as the episode abated. He laid his index and middle finger on the side of his neck, checking his heart rate, 122 beats per minute. The lightheadedness was caused by the tachycardia. The tachycardia caused by the atrial fibrillation. The AFib caused by heart damage from long-term carbon monoxide poisoning. His health had become a long line of falling dominoes. Joel lowered the window to let in some cold late February air and felt better. He signaled and pulled the car back onto the highway. The landscape of western Nebraska sprawled flat and empty in every direction. Once he left Grand Island and headed west, it had felt like he was driving into oblivion. The monochromatic winter vista was uninterrupted only by the rare copse of barren trees, herds of beef cattle swath grazing in snow-dusted pastures, or the occasional cluster of towering white wind turbines looming against the horizon. The radio station dissolved into static, hissing through the blown speaker on the driver's side door, and Joel switched it off. Following the GPS on his phone, he took the marked exit to the southern tip of the Nebraska sandhills, toward the little town of Savage, a place that appeared to count more cattle than people. He passed a green metal sign that read, "Welcome to Savage, Nebraska, a savagely nice place to live." As Joel followed directions to St. Joe's Catholic Church, he took in the layout of the city limits. 2 gray concrete grain co-op silos dominated the center, and a small red brick library cowered in the silo shadows. The Savage Fire Department and City Hall shared the same plain metal building, and next to that, a Dollar General store. The downtown area consisted of one street lined by stone facade buildings in varying states of age and neglect, with storefront names like Mickey's Tavern, Donna's Cafe, and Johnston Realtors. Just off the downtown strip, Heather's Hair Shack, Collins Funeral Home, and Parker's Auto Dealer and Repair. Like the town founder, the people of Savage seemed to name everything after themselves. Joel reached the edge of town where the historic St. Joe's Church stood, a medieval-looking structure of cream-colored bricks, now dingy with age, a steep-pitched wooden roof, dull stained glass windows, and a domineering bell tower entrance. The small fellowship hall, a newer addition attached to the south transept, had seemingly been built as an afterthought from mismatched orange-toned brick and fitted with plain windows. Joel had never been a fan of old churches because of the expensive, burdensome upkeep and the cold, oppressive feeling they always gave him. This church was no different. He parked his car in the gravel lot next to a mud cake truck and got out to stretch his 6-foot, 5-inch frame. Joel had made the 3-hour-plus trip without stopping, and his legs were killing him. He smoothed down his wavy hair that was more salt than pepper these days. Sunlight reflected off the snow-covered ground, and he squinted, patting his coat pockets for his sunglasses he'd seemingly misplaced at some point during the trip. He shaded his eyes and took in the rectory next door, feeling even more disheartened. A small one-story farmhouse, complete with old lead windows outfitted in paint-peeling arches, a crumbling chimney perched atop a gabled roof, and a sloping front porch. Home, more like self-imposed exile, but temporary at least, just for the Lenten season. Holy Cross, his previous parish in Grand Island, had been a new, bigger building that featured a contemporary sanctuary with modern lighting and AV technology, a spacious hall, a fellowship hall, classrooms, a suite of offices, and completely renovated rectory where Joel had comfortably lived. He acutely missed it and his former parishioners. A cold gust whipped across the parking lot. Joel popped the collar of his coat and turtled his neck, trying to stay warm. He ascended the narrow, ice-crusted steps and entered the dim vestibule. Wind whistled through the gap in the heavy front doors, and the air inside was barely warmer than out. He was glad to have his wool coat. Joel paused at a letterboard on the wall and read the greeting. "You can't enter heaven unless Jesus enters you." He snorted. "Is something funny?" Joel turned around, startled. A stern-looking older woman stood at the top of the stairs. She wore a navy sweatshirt with a picture of 2 kittens frolicking across the chest. "No," Joel said, consciously setting his face in a neutral expression. I was just reading the message here." The woman's eyes flickered to the board and back to him. Her upper lip twitched. Joel had a sinking feeling she put up the quote. "Can I help you?" she asked. Yes, I'm Father Joel Morris, the interim pastor." She drew back. "Oh, I didn't realize who you were without your collar." She descended the steps. Joel instinctively touched his neck. He hadn't bothered to put on his clerical collar this morning. "It was a long drive," he said, "and I wanted to be comfortable." He stopped short of saying that lately the collar had started to feel like it was choking him, and he had taken to leaving it off more and more. She narrowed her eyes at him in seeming disapproval. Welcome to St. Joe's. She offered a firm handshake and a tight smile. I'm Belinda Horney. As soon as she said her name, Joel felt an involuntary bubble of laughter balloon in his belly, and his brain momentarily screamed to hold it in, but the laugh continued to rise and finally popped out of his mouth.